active listeners as people with superpowers. They make people feel special. They make people feel listened to, and that's actually making people realize, like, oh, it's actually nice to have an engaging conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Science of Balance. I'm your host, Fabrizio, executive health coach and founder of ProHealthX Coaching. With me today is a special guest and fellow coach, Richard. Say hi, Richard.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard. I'm a health coach and a personal trainer. Glad to be here, and I'm excited to kick off this episode.
All right. Excited to have you here, Richard. So let's get started. So basically, today we're diving a little bit deep into what we call the art of active listening. And why we're going to do that, you will find out pretty soon, because active listening is a very critical part of, let's say, the way we communicate with other people. So, active listening is actually something that we all think we do, but the question is, do we really do active listening, and do we really practice active listening? And again, we say active listening is not just about the hearing words. It's also about truly understanding what somebody is trying to say, or somebody is trying to convey with his or her own words. It's actually a powerful tool that can boost interactions, collaboration, and most importantly, understanding between people. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
I really like that last part, understanding. Active listening is, yeah, we can name it a tool, but it's also the way you conduct conversation with your friends, with your family. Sometimes you might not be always focused on listening what people say, or only half, but sometimes you might feel when you're talking that you're actually quite engaged, and that your body language is completely aligned to what the other person is saying. You're nodding, trying to understand. When you reply, you wait a little bit. Yeah, those are nice signs that you are actually active listening. And maybe in those moments, you might feel that you're actually in a flow, that conversation is really engaging, and you're trying to go somewhere together in a conversation. Then it becomes more of a, maybe a form of art rather than just talking. And yeah, what highlighting active listening is really a topic I like, because like you said, it really helps to improve understanding between you and other people.
That's really true. I really like the part where you say understanding, because again, often we hear words, but we don't really clearly understand, to your point, the words behind those words, or what are the unspoken words. So I think if you find yourself in a conversation wondering whether you're truly being heard or understood, actually this episode is right for you. All right, Richard. So I would like to kick things off, and maybe one question we'd like to ask you is, how would you define active listening?
Um, I would say, in the most simple term, active listening is trying to the best of your abilities to really understand what someone is saying to you or trying to say to you. Um, Signs that you are employing active listening, or that someone is actively listening to you, they could be that, you hold eye contact, you're nodding, you're trying to repeat the last thing you heard, you don't interrupt people, of course, but you also feel engaged. You try to really not put yourself first, that your ego comes second, that you, instead of trying to make yourself heard, you are trying to uh, push the conversation where both of you are trying to reach a point, where both of you are trying to learn something, or you are just trying to learn something about the other person. And like I said before, when you are actively listening, you might feel a sort of flow coming in the conversation, that things flow nicely. You're engaged, your curiosity is heightened, you are just more in line with the person you're talking to.
So if I give my perspective, for me also active listening, again, I re-emphasize, not just about hearing words, it's about understanding what are the emotion behind those words, and within the certain context that the conversation is taking into, and also looking at those unspoken words, because often, again, we hear sound, we hear words, but what we are losing is the attention on What are the unspoken words behind the conversation?
Yeah, I really feel that it does require a lot more effort mentally and physically to be fully present and to be actively listening to somebody, because it really helps if you can leave your ego at the door and any other preconceived ideas of the topic you have beforehand, and not trying to make yourself heard. Those are all really things that come quite natural to us, to jump on someone saying something and share your own idea. We really love to talk. And actively listening requires you to put yourself second, and that doesn't really come natural. And yeah, it's quite common to have conversations like that, which I always like to uh, refer to tongue in cheek as having two monologues running in parallel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What a wonderful sentence, closing sentence. Again, having two monologues running together, running simultaneously at the same time. So because we are not listening, but we're just talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way of expressing that. And this often happens also in our daily life, right? So when somebody's upset, and then instead of listening the reasons why, what you just say, we have a monologue running with no content except for just words crossing your mind without staying in your mind and being fully absorbed. But there is also maybe one thing that we could briefly look into, and what is not active listening. What are your thoughts on that?
I always find it easier to describe, let's say, feelings or symptoms that give you the feeling that someone's not really listening to you. So, for example, one is obviously no eye contact, that the other person's, let's say, doing something else, not looking at you. That's a very obvious sign. Another one is that your conversation partner interrupts you before you finish talking, or replies with something that does not really have relevance to what you just said. Like, let's say, changing the topic, or just saying something that has no relevance. In short, you can say what is not active listening is not trying to understand the point of
Yeah.
what someone is saying.
Now, there is one thing I would like also to address today, which is what is effective active listening, because we've been talking so far what it is, what is not, and we gave some examples on that. But what are factors that can affect actually the practicing of active listening? So I think one of the biggest factor there is attention. So, for instance, we live in a world where we are constantly bombarded by distractions, and where focusing becomes a more special skill rather than the normality, using one of your terminology. So again, a simple example is you talk to a friend or you talk to somebody and they are scrolling their phone as they are listening to you. So obviously they are splitting their attention between what you say and what they see on their own screens. And so again, for me, attention is one of the key where active listening and needs to be built upon. What are your thoughts also here, Rich? What are things that maybe can affect active listening, to your point?
I like the fact that you repeated the word attention, because to me, we've learned in the last couple of years that attention has become the commodity to be exploited by social media. So it's Instagram, YouTube. We're constantly, fight. Actually, not we, but we are constantly being, distracted, and yeah, big companies have learned to exploit, our attention, and it has become quite hard to fully give your attention to people, because you can constantly be
Yeah,
distracted. And I would say that's the nowadays it's the main undermining factor for active listening. It's like you're allowing yourself to be constantly distracted, and
yeah,
people maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I start seeing active listeners as people with superpowers. They make people feel special. They make people feel listened to, and that's actually making people realize, like, oh, it's actually nice to have an engaging conversation and not being in superficial or half, let's say, again, two monologues running in parallel conversations.
yeah. It's absolutely true. Indeed, we live in a world with a lot of distractions, and focusing is becoming more a luxurious way of handling things rather than normality. But there is also, I think, another one which is we mentioned that before, which is the emotional bias, let's say, or being convinced of certain ideas that you're not open to maybe discuss. So having some kind of closed mind approach, and then you allow your own beliefs to bias the active listening. Because let's say if you're saying something that maybe I strongly believe is not true, but I'm not actually willing to understand what is your point of view, I just close my mind and I selectively allow certain only a part of your discussion, a part of your words to reach my brain in that sense. So being biased by your own beliefs, I think is also another big one linked to the emotional readiness or unreadiness to eventually engage in certain other conversation.
Besides that, emotional readiness, of course, being having to deal with crises like financial issues, relationships, stress, makes it extremely difficult to become an active listener. And that's why our coaches, have a very good role to play in this society. Um, Another quick question for the listeners now to help you keep thinking about this topic. Can you name an instance where you were actively listening to someone and also the other way around? Did you feel when someone was actually listening to you? And, can you elaborate on how did that feel for you or how did it feel for the other person?
That's a wonderful question, Richard. And I would like to encourage every listener right now to just take a minute to think about it. So welcome back, and now I think it's good. It's a good moment to reflect a little bit on how relevant. So let's say what is relevant in active listening. Let's say for me again, one more time. We discussed a couple of elements that are the component of active listening, but there is also another one which is empathy, and empathy is like the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And where, for instance, if you're engaging into a discussion, so how can you active listening what is being said? And is indeed by putting yourself in the story that you're being told. So that create that emotional bridge and then empathy, so that make us listening truly to the words and not as a sound, but also look at the emotions that the other person is trying to express. What are your thoughts also on the empathy side, Richard?
Yeah, I really like that. Like I said before, to me, actively listening means putting your ego at the door, but that might not always be enough. It's also really important to actually want to hear what the other person is saying, and that requires it definitely requires a base level of empathy. To me, that comes quite easy by not looking at conversation just as a superficial pastime, but more to see it as an art form to create flow, to try to conduct yourself so that both of you, not just me as the listener or the speaker, but both of us have a pleasant conversation so that the replies I give are actually building on top of what was being said before, and that we are both trying to find out what's going on. It doesn't need to be a topic that I chose, because if I'm actively listening, usually that means I didn't pick the topic. But it still means that I can try to figure out what's going on or try to learn as much as possible. And pursuing it from that angle really helps for me to be a better listener. What are some tools or tips that you can share for actively listening, Fabrizio?
I think if I can distill out a little bit what we've been discussing so far, again, one key tip that I would like to give is pay full attention. So this means really be 100% present in the conversation. And again, it's not just about the words, it's about the message that is being conveyed during the conversation. And another tip it would be, for instance, never assume. And again, this goes back to the being biased by our own thoughts, beliefs, and maybe also our own emotions. So just be open and trying to enter a conversation without assuming what the words that the other person is telling you have the same meaning also to you. Because maybe you might say that something doesn't look good, but what does good mean to you? So never assume actually what is being told, and engage into the conversation, trying to understand what it actually means to the other person. And this ties nicely with being curious and actually explore the meaning behind words. So there is obviously out of this discussion with Richard, one question might be natural to be asked, and is how can we improve active listening? So one strategy I personally use is, first of all, is to ground myself before any conversation. So really take the moment to clear my thoughts, get my, let's say, beliefs and my bias away from the conversation, and really fully be present in what the other person is trying to convey to me. How does it resonate with you, that?
Totally. Like finding a way to calm your mind and be more present and have no distractions on you before you even start a conversation. Really useful. Another way I like to do to myself is more based on feeling, on emotion, because I feel everybody likes it when someone hangs on to every word you're saying. What helps me to get in a good state of mind is just to remember first what it feels like when someone is listening to you and thinks you're the most interesting person in the world. It sounds a
Oh,
little bit ridiculous, but we all have that ego that likes to be stroked. I think that's a human thing. And when I think about that it actually feels great when someone really is interested in what you're trying to say. Then I'm just try to give that to somebody else. Like, okay, now it's my turn to, really try to hang on to what somebody is trying to say, and see if I can be a good listener. And then that also sometimes makes my day, to just to be a nice listener and see the reaction on that person's body language, that they're actually responding really nice.
excellent, excellent. You're touching indeed on the emotional side, you're touching on the body language that we discussed about not being biased by your own thoughts and belief, be emotionally ready. So a lot of elements that indeed make active listening possible. So maybe before we wrap up this episode, I think it's good to give a couple of tips to our listeners. And we have mentioned multiple things throughout the episode, but I think maybe one that I would like to also re-emphasize is the reflective listening. And reflective listening is, again, mirror back what the other person is saying by confirming. So one more time, don't assume that you understood certain things that have been told. As do not assume that what the person is trying to convey to you has the same meaning to him or to her. And that's where reflective listening can be very helpful. And the other one is maintain eye contact. So that will force us to stay connected to the person in front and avoid any sort of distraction coming from your environment. So these are also two tips that I would like to add on top of what we have discussed.
Yeah, those are really great technical tips. So if you are not sure on how to get started, those two are really good to start with, because maintaining eye contact, mirroring back what someone said, making sure you got someone's intentions correct, those are really good tools to start with. But I also, again, what we've been talking about before is, don't forget your emotional intention. Really want to hear what someone is trying to say. As long as that intention is there, you'll find many ways to make it happen.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate your thoughts on active listening. And I would say we can go towards the wrap up of this episode. And I would like to thank again Richard for being such a fantastic guest and share his opinion and thoughts about active listening. Is there anything else you would like to add before we really go to the wrap up?
Yeah, just thanks for giving me the opportunity to voice my thoughts, and it was great to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure, and we're looking forward to more episodes together. So, just to wrap up this episode for today, again, active listening. Remember, it's not just about hearing words; It's about understanding. It's actually a tool if you want a superpower and a skill that can improve your relationship and your life, whether it's professional or even your personal. So until next time, everyone, and keep those ears open and your hearts even more. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.